Hi, morning everyone. Welcome to episode 43 of the Knitting Expat podcast. Today is Monday, the 4th of January 2016, finally. So, Happy New Year. Hope you have had a wonderful new year and that January has started off well for you. Just want to say hello and welcome to all new and returning viewers. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me today. And yeah, my name is Mina. You can find me on Ravelry as Mina86. You can find the podcast group on Ravelry as the Knitting Expat Podcast. You can find me on Instagram as Mina Phillip, and my show notes for this and all previous episodes are on knittingexpat.wordpress.com. And you can also I sell project bags that I make on Etsy as Mina Makes, and all of those links for all of those are below the video in the description box on YouTube, in the episode thread on Ravelry, and on the show notes page. I've had a couple of people ask me if I can add like the sort of little headings on the video when I talk about different projects and stuff. I can't for a number of reasons. One, I'm not entirely sure how to do that. I'm sure it's pretty simple, but I don't really know. And two, my editing time takes a while because my videos are usually quite long. Exporting them and then uploading them takes a while. So if I had to then sit down and go through that, it would take me too long. And frankly, I'd rather be knitting, or doing other things than sat trying to edit a video at my computer. I've always kept my editing to a minimum. I've done it when I needed to, but I'm not going to sit there and like add in titles for my projects on every single video. But having said that, I do write rather comprehensive show notes every single week. So if there is anything I've talked about that you can't remember, you can check the show notes to see what projects I'm working on, and if there's a pattern for it. If there's a pattern that I'm using, I will usually link to it, or if it's a design I'm working on and it's not linked yet, but the name will be there, so when it does come out, you can look it up. So I hope that's okay. I hope that doesn't upset anybody, but I just have to prioritize. I want to do this every week. I want to be able to sit and chat with you guys every week. And one of the ways I can do that is by not spending too much time editing. If I have to then spend a ridiculous amount of time editing, then it's going to become harder and harder for me to keep doing this. So I kind of need to do what works for me, if that makes sense. So I'm sorry if that, if you find that, I don't know. I'm sorry if that doesn't that doesn't work for you necessarily. Right, I thought I would take this opportunity as it's the new year and there are a bunch of new viewers over the last couple of months. I might take this opportunity to reintroduce myself a little bit. For those of you who haven't had the time or inclination to want to go back and watch all the past episodes, which frankly, I don't blame you. There are so many wonderful podcasts out there. It is quite hard to sit down and watch everyone's back catalogue of episodes. So, quick introduction, like I said, me and my husband, we live in Bahrain, and that's it's a tiny island in the Middle East. It's in the Persian Gulf, and it's just off the eastern coast of Saudi Arabia. My husband actually works in Saudi Arabia, and there's a bridge, it's called the Causeway, that links Bahrain to Saudi Arabia, so he crosses that bridge every day. But because it's a border crossing, he has to cross an international border every day to go to and from work. That does slow him down a little bit, but in actual fact, the distance is quite short. It's something like 45 kilometres from our home to his office, but it usually takes around an hour if there's not a lot of traffic because of the border crossing. We have two cats. We have two Scottish Folds, Hugo and Derek. At the moment, they are both sleeping upstairs on our bed. The weather here at the moment, in the winter, it's become rather cold. Not cold as you would normally expect for winter. It's probably more like an early spring sort of temperatures as you would get in the UK or Europe. But for us, it's quite cold. We don't have any heating in our home. We only have air conditioning. So we've got tile floors everywhere, and we don't have all that many windows. We do have a fair few windows, and they're quite large, but in relative to entire wall space, there's not that many windows, so the house stays quite cold. And that's more for the summer, so the house doesn't heat up too quickly. But in the winter, it also means it stays cold quite for most of the time, and the tile floors make it quite cold. So the boys tend to stay upstairs in our bedroom to stay warm if they can. Um, and yeah, so like I said, we're out here because we used to live in Dubai before we moved to Bahrain. We moved to Bahrain almost a year ago now. It'll be a year in February. And yeah, we moved because of my husband's job. And actually, I'll be talking a bit more about that um, later in the episode. So let's get going. And first up, I wanted to talk a bit about some podcasts that I've been watching recently. Now, for the last month or so, I've been struggling to catch up on all the podcasts that I follow, and I do follow quite a lot. And every week I try to talk about a couple of the ones that I've really been enjoying, or if there's a couple of new ones that I found, I try and talk about them. And like I said, for the last month, because I've been trying to catch up on all the ones I've been normally watching, like I've been watching for quite a while, I haven't had much opportunity to check out any new ones. I've written down a whole bunch of names that I've heard other podcasters mention and that I've seen pop up on YouTube as like YouTube recommends and stuff like that, to check out. But I finally caught up on all of my podcasts the week before New Year's. So I took last week and I had some time to check out some new ones. And Hugo's just arrived in the room, so if he comes over, I'll grab him to say hi. So I have 3 to share with you this week. The first one is the Wool Gathering podcast with Natasha and Meredith, and they're based out of Canada. And I really enjoyed their podcast. They only have a few episodes, and sorry, that jingling is Hugo on the cat tree. They've only got a few episodes and I've only watched 1 or 2 of them so far, but I've really been enjoying it, and their interaction with each other is really, really good fun. It's always interesting to hear what they're knitting on, and yeah, it's just a really lovely, easy to listen to podcast. And the second one is a podcast by This Old Knit, and that's Nina. And Nina has actually been someone that I interacted with quite a bit on Instagram. We chat quite a lot back and forth on each other's pictures and stuff like that. And for some reason, I don't know how it escaped me that I had no idea that she had a podcast. I think it's because her Instagram name is completely different than her name, or at least doesn't sound similar. And I'd heard her podcast mentioned a few times, but I just never put 2 and 2 together. So I finally figured that out. Sorry, Nina, I was a bit slow. And I've had a chance to just catch up on a couple of her latest episodes. I haven't had a chance to go through any more yet, but I'm planning to. And I've really been enjoying that as well. So make sure you check that one out. And the last one I was going to mention today is the Knitting Broomstick podcast with Jilly. Jilly is so enthusiastic and so energetic, and she's always really positive, and it's just really fun to listen to her talk and to listen to her talk about her knitting projects and stuff like that. And I've actually caught up with all of her episodes. Her podcast episodes aren't all that long, which is great. They're usually less than an hour, and I think I watched them all in a couple of days. There's only 14 of them. So, and she just had a baby. So congratulations, Jilly, if you ever get around to watching this. Congratulations. And yeah, so these 3 podcasts will be linked in my show notes, and the podcasters will be linked in the episode thread. What I do is every week, the podcasts that I mention at the beginning section and throughout the episode, I link I link the YouTube channels in my show notes, and I link the actual podcasters on Ravelry, so you should be able to find them that way. Right, so let's move on to some actual knitting now. Finished objects first. Finished objects, well, for those of you who have been following my podcast for even just a couple of weeks will know that I am participating in a sock knitting challenge with Marsha of the Fairy Little podcast. So Marsha challenged me to, actually she got in touch with me, I think it was back in October. I'd posted a picture on Instagram saying I'd finished 3 pairs of socks in 5 days, which was crazy fast. And I have no idea how I managed it. I generally don't even understand how I do knit so quickly, I just do. And so she messaged me challenging me to like a sock knit off, as it were, like for a 1 month period to to see who can knit the most pairs of socks between the two of us. Anyway, so we went back and forth about dates and stuff, and then we decided, you know what, we'll do it in the new year. We'll do it for the whole month of January, because November was a crazy month for me travel-wise, and it wasn't going to work out. So we decided January would be the year that we were going to do this. And then we thought it would be really fun to open it up to everyone else and have like a general sock knit along, which is what we're also doing in our groups. So January 1st rolled around and I cast on my first pair of socks. And the first pair of socks I knit was out of Patterns Kroy FX. This is their Clovers colourway, as you can see. And there is a full pair. I knit my socks 2 at a time, cuff down, and I do have a free 2 at a time cuff down sock pattern, which is called Mina's 2 at a time socks. It's free download on Ravelry. You can go in there and check that out. And I also have a YouTube video, I think it's a few videos back now, where I talk about how I manage my yarn to knit socks 2 at a time to avoid getting tangles with my cakes. And so this is the second sock, as you can see. And these will likely be for my dad, unless he doesn't like them, in which case they'll be my brother's, but I'm pretty sure he will. So that's that, and I have quite a bit left over. And then the second pair of socks I have are these ones, which I knit out of yarn that Andy from Andre C Knits podcast, another wonderful podcast that I really enjoy, and if you're not watching her, why aren't you? And she also dyes yarn. And we did a swap way back when, really like sort of last year, early summer last year. And she dyed me up a custom skein, custom colourway. I said I really liked orange and blues together, and so this is what she came up with. And I knit myself a pair of socks, and as you can see, I knit the legs on my socks quite long. Yet this is the first time I've knit a sock with such a long leg and still had almost half the yarn left over. I don't know how this is possible. These socks only took 61 grams. How? I am not entirely sure. But I could basically, if I didn't do such a long leg, I could probably get another pair of socks out of this. If I only did the leg like this long, probably get another pair of socks out of it. Anyway, I really like this. I also like how one sock is more yellow and the other one's more blue, which is just fun. And yeah, so that was my second pair of socks. So I knit the first pair on the 1st of January, started and finished. The second pair I started on the 1st of January and I finished on the 2nd. And yeah, like I said, I've got a fair bit left over. And I'm doing pretty well so far. 2 socks, 2 days, not so bad. And then I cast on 3 new pairs of socks. Rather than just having 1 or 2 going at a time, I kind of thought having 3 going in tandem might be a nice way to keep, changing it up and not having to do same thing again and again. Working on one sock the whole time, sort of mix it up a bit. And I also thought I'd show you this. I posted a picture of this on Instagram, and I meant to show this to you guys a few weeks ago, actually, when I first got it, but I forgot. So I got this, and it came in a pack of 3. There were 2 other designs, but they were all this sort of like blue with like the silver metallic patterns on the covers. So like I said, I've got 3, but this is the first one I've chosen to use because it looks like knit stitches. And I am making this my knitting journal for 2016, or at least the first knitting journal for 2016, because let's face it, I'm probably going to burn through this really quickly. So this is what I've done. So this is my January 2016, this is what I've done. And yeah, so I have my cast on date, bind off date, or end date. What I did, because every time I knit a pair of socks, occasionally I tweak things ever so slightly. I might do a couple of increases before I do the heel, or I might tweak something a little bit just to see how it works differently each time. But I use my standard vanilla pattern is my Mina's 2 at a time socks, but every now and again I tweak it depending on what yarn I'm using. And then I just have a sample of the yarn stuck in and the tag. So that's my first sock, and then that's my second sock. And yeah, that's it so far. And then I only do this once I finish the project. So they go in the order of being finished. And one other thing that I'll talk about that later. So, move on to works in progress. And like I said, I have a few things to show you. But first, I think what I will show you is the project I worked on last week. So last week when I podcasted, I showed you I'd finished my Christmas Eve socks. And those were pair number 40 for last year. And I didn't want to cast on anything new between then and the new year. I wanted to just give my hands a bit of a break and just sort of get ready for this month. But what I ended up doing was picking up my sock yarn blanket because I hadn't picked this up for ages. And I felt bad and I wanted to work on it a little bit. So the last time I showed it to you, I'd done 100 squares. So in my mind, that's about a quarter of my blanket. I want to have about 400 squares in my blanket. And I'm kind of doing it where, let me show you here. So you can see how here, these are going this way, the decreased miters are going this way, and then on this side, they're going this way. And then on the bottom, I'm going to have them going the opposite two ways, so that it's going to look like a point coming, like an X coming out the middle. So each quarter is going to have 100 squares in it. And so on this half, I've already got 5. Basically, it's going to be 10 across, 10 down for each quarter. So I've already got 5 across, 10 down. So that's a quarter is half done. And then I added a row, 3 columns of 10. I hope that made sense. So I'll show you from the bottom actually, because this is where I started from. So I added these 3, which were given to me by Emily of Fibertown. So this one these 2 I showed you last week. This one was Dragonfly Fibers in the Starry Night. This one, I don't know, and she couldn't remember when she gave it to me. And this one was a Vespa sock in some rainbow colorway, which I love. I love those colors, how bright and beautiful that is. Then the next row, these 3 were given to me as part of a swap that I did with Anya from Germany. And she's Anya Loves Knits on Ravelry, Instagram, sorry. Then these 3 and these 2, and then the grey bits that I've used to finish these 2 squares is a separate yarn as well. So these 6 yarns were sent to me by Holly of the Swift Knits podcast. And then this row 3 and these 2 were the last set of scraps that Katrina gave me when I met up with her in London last May. Not London, Tunbridge Wells, that we met up with her. She was a viewer of the podcast and she gave me a massive bag full of sock scraps to start my blanket with. So thank you so much, Katrina. This one, I was sorting through my scraps, my minis that people had sent me in swaps and stuff. And I put them all into different Ziploc bags for each person so I wouldn't forget who gave me what, because that's what I like to do. I like to group all the minis that each person has given me into one space on my blanket. That way I know that section is from that person. This was the only mini skein that was kind of just loose on its own, didn't belong to a set, and I couldn't figure out who gave me this. There was no tag on it that I could match up with other tags to say, okay, that's that handwriting or that's that style of label that that person has used. So I have no idea what this is. I have no idea who gave it to me, but I had it, so I plopped that in there. If you gave this to me, please let me know it was you, so I know who gave that to me. Then the next 6 were given to me by 7, including this one up here, were given to me by Nessa of the Kilter Craft podcast. So Nessa, that is your little corner of my blanket. And there's a variety in here. This one is a Berenvuller barefoot sock in grenadine. This one is Uncommon Thread. This one's Malabrigo. I think there's a few random sock yarns in there as well. And then these 2 squares here, this one and the first 2 stripes in this one is Knit Picks Felici in Time Traveller. That was given to me by Z of the Noodle Knits podcast. And this is a Cascade Heritage sock that I used to finish that square that she also gave me. And then the last 3 squares on the blanket are from Steph of London House Yarns, and so she sent me a mini of her Weather the Weather colourway, which I really love. It's kind of this rainbow with blue skies and grey clouds. And then these 2, I can't remember what she had said they were. She'd written it on the note that she sent me, and I can't find the note to check what the colours were. So those were those. But one thing I have noticed in my blanket is, even compared to here, my squares here are bigger and they're more loose. And I think the problem has been partly my gauge has loosened up since I started knitting this blanket. But secondly, I think it's also because when I'm knitting on it, I've now got the weight of this blanket underneath it. So I need to be careful when I knit my squares that I'm not pulling the blanket to stretch it out too much, that to stop it stopping the squares just getting bigger and bigger. It's not a massive deal, like I really don't mind. It is a scrap blanket, it is for me, and it's just full of memories. So I don't really mind too badly. One thing that does worry me is this yarn, this one by Baron Fuller. Really lovely yarn. I love my socks made out of it, but every time I wash those socks made out of this yarn, the red just bleeds ridiculously, even though I've washed them several times now. So I've got to be careful when I wash this blanket. This is definitely a hand wash blanket. There are some non-superwash yarns in this, but yeah, I'm really loving how it's turned out so far. And so that's going to be put away now, at least until the end of January. But I'm really looking forward to adding a whole section of minis from the socks that I've knit this month, just so that'll always be my January Sockathon section of my blanket. And right, so moving on to more socks. So the first pair I'm going to show you is Knit Picks Stroll Fingering Hand Painted in the Koi Pond colourway, which is just so beautiful. And you guys know how much I love like blues and oranges together. A lot of the socks that I'm knitting are in this sort of range of colour scheme, and I really like how the Knit Picks Stroll Fingering, the hand painted stripe, they do almost stripe, they're not proper stripes, but it's like a variegated striping pattern. And so this is the yarn, Stroll Fingering Koi Pond hand painted. It's 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and it's really sort of affordable for sock yarn, really soft. It's really nice to knit with, and these are now ready for the heel. That's the thing, like I don't generally knit short legs on my socks. I know some people only knit like 30 or 40 rounds before they start the heel, but I do a 20 row rib, and then I do my minimum is usually 60 rounds on the legs, so 80 rounds total before I start my heels. This was, I think, 70 rounds. I need to check my notes, but around 70 or 75 rounds on the leg, plus the 20 for the cuff. And these ones were, I think it was just 55, but because it's Patterns Croy, I was using larger needles, so and because my dad likes a long leg on his socks, so yeah. So that was the other rule for the Sockathon, is that you can't do shorty socks, you can't just do ankle socks. They have to have a decent cuff on them. And yeah, so I'm not gonna just knit shorter cuffs to get more socks done, just because otherwise I wouldn't wear them. I want long socks. I want socks that are the right length for me, that I like. But these are probably going to be gifted. Having said that, I still do my minimum 60 for gift socks as well. And yeah, I really liked it. I really like how they're knitting up, and I love this cute little ducky, like a little rubber ducky progress keeper. And I also wanted to show you the project bag, because I just think it's a perfect match for this yarn. And this is one of my project bags that I make, and I just wanted to show it to you. What I do with it if I want to knit from the bag without taking the yarn out is I usually fold over the top, and this prevents any issues with the zipper getting caught, and the yarn getting caught in the zipper or anything like that. And so with all my project bags, you can effectively turn them into a yarn bowl by folding the top over. So it folds over nicely, and it's sturdy, it fits your yarn and all the other bits in there, so you can knit straight from the bag. My next work in progress is in a bag made for me by the lovely Nessa of the Kilter Craft podcast. We did a swap a while back, and I do the same with her bag. I just fold the top over. You know, just get the zipper out the way. Yeah, and this is another Knit Picks yarn. This is the Knit Picks Felici, and this is in the Countess colorway. And this one's also ready for the cuff, for the heel to be put in. So the last one I showed you is pair 3. This is pair number 4. The only thing is I'm not overly impressed with Felici, to be honest. The ones that I've done, where it's like a gradient of single color, like this section here, that's supposed to be 2 different colors. That's not just an extra thick stripe. But it's so hard to see. What you can just about tell there's a difference between this section and that bit there. But it's so faint, the colour change. It's quite disappointing, I think. And then these 2 purples are almost identical. It's supposed to be 6 different shades of purple in this, and it doesn't really look like that. But anyway, it's not a problem. These will probably also be gift socks, and I like them. I'm just not as impressed with them as I thought I would be. And I have to say, even though it's the same sort of fibre content and same type of fibre, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, it's the same as the, that's the front to show. It's the same as the Stroll. I actually think the Stroll fingering is softer than Felici. I know everyone talks about how soft Felici is, and it is soft, don't get me wrong. It's by no means like a hard or rough yarn. But knitting on them both at the same time, I definitely feel like the Stroll is softer. Don't know, does anyone else feel that way? Maybe it's just me. So that's another one ready for a heel. So I'm hoping to get those 2 heels done today. And the third pair that I'm working on are my Outlander socks. And this is another project bag that I've made. Rainbow unicorns, how adorable. I love these. My mum got me I think it was a 1/2 meter cut of this fabric for my birthday. It's part of the fabric she got me. And I've made this project bag for myself. There's another one in this size. This is my medium wide wedge, which is perfect for 2 at a time socks. It's perfect for like 1 or 2 skein projects, really. It fits them quite comfortably. Like there's a lot of space in this bag still. You could easily do a shawl out of this size of a bag. And again, same thing, just fold over the rim. And yeah, so I'm doing my Outlander socks. And so this is Wool & Vine Yarns in her Outlander colourway. I really love that. This is on her footsie base. So this is the BFL nylon base. I just love how these are knitting up. And so if I just grab the tag, I can show you. So that's Wool & Vine Yarns, and I believe it's 80% BFL and 20% nylon. They're not like super soft like merino soft, but they're not scratchy or rough in the way that Regia is. They feel very sturdy, so I'm really looking forward to these socks. And so these are about halfway down the leg. I've done 20 rows on the cuff, and I've done 40 rounds on the leg so far, and I think I want to take these up to 80, maybe 70 or 80 rounds on the leg. We'll see how long it gets before I start the heel. So I'd like to get this up to the heel and hopefully get the heel done as well today, and see how we do with that. So in light of all of this knitting that I have done, and bear in mind today is only the 4th of January and this contest goes on until the end of the month, I had originally picked out 10 skeins of yarn, and I have already knit 2 pairs of socks, and I have 3 more on the go, which means I only have 5 pairs of socks worth of yarn prepped and picked out already. So I made the decision to pick out a few more skeins just in case. I thought I'd share those with you. And the first one is in another project bag that I've made. Love this. I love the little black cat. That one reminds me of Derek. And this fabric, I'm just going to put it out there right now. It is, because it's squares, it's actually printed crooked. The squares aren't printed straight on the fabric. So I'm trying to find if there's a place where I can show it to you clearly. It doesn't actually show up too badly on this particular bag. But also there doesn't seem to be a definitive right way up, because you see here there's an upside down cat, but here this cat's this way up, and then that cat there's that way up. So it was hard for me to figure out, does it go this way around or does it go that way around, the fabric, you know, which way around does it go? So I just picked a way, and that's the orientation I'm going with for my bags that are going to be out of this print, because there will be more of these bags coming. And the yarn I have picked out in here is by Zazu Yarns, and this is her Magic Dust colorway, which is this beautiful sort of tonal purples with slight like tinges of pink, and there's some darker black in there as well, like tones of black in there as well. But I really love this overall sort of purple color, kind of matches my outfit, matches my cardigan. And this, I may be crazy for wanting to do this, but I had a sudden burst of inspiration the other day and decided I came up with a new sort of pattern idea for a pair of socks. So in the midst of all this like feverish sock knitting, I'm also going to try designing a pair of socks at the same time. We will see how this goes. Then another two skeins of yarn that I picked out was this one, which is from I Knit or Dye in London. And I picked out this one because I'd originally picked this out to knit my brother a pair of socks. And this is 100% superwash BFL. It's the same yarn that I'm knitting my dad a pair of socks out of that I've already skeined up, which is the black and white one. But I showed my brother this and I asked him if he would like socks out of this, and he said yes. And I thought I would show you how this skein is dyed up, because then it makes more sense. So you have this one end which is undyed, and there's a bit in the middle which is dyed this blue, and it goes into this darker sort of tealy green. So when this knits up, it will stripe a little bit, kind of like how the Knit Picks Stroll one striped up the koi pond, a little bit like that. Yeah, so that's how that one looks, and I'm really excited to get that on the needles. I'm terrible at rewinding hanks of yarn. Never get it to look as nice as it did. Okay, well that will do. I've got to wind this up anyway. This is why I didn't mind opening it up for you. And so there's that. And the second one is this one, which is Hedgehog Fibers in the Vengeance colorway. This is their sock base, 90% superwash merino, 10% nylon, 100 grams is 400 meters. It's really lovely deep reds with bits of black and some pops of purple in there. And when I ordered this, I ordered 3 skeins from Hedgehog Fibers that were delivered to my parents when I was in London recently. And which I explained on the podcast a few episodes back. Well, my brother was there when the package came, and I was opening it up and showing him the yarns as I took them out. And when I pulled out this one, he was like, "Oh, that's really nice." Like, he liked it. So I was like, I think I might make him socks out of this one because I think he'd really like it and he'd appreciate it. And it's soft, so why not? So those two, and I've picked out another yarn that I've already caked up, which was part of the original 10, which was going to be for my brother. So these 3, and then I knit the Highland socks, which I showed you last week. I knit those for my brother as well. So those 4 pairs, if they are all done, will be for my brother's birthday present this year, I think. And the other 2 skeins of yarn that I've picked out was the other day, Perry was in here. Say the other day, I think it was like yesterday or the day before. Perry was in here and he was looking at my yarn cubby back there, which I've actually reorganized a little bit. I reorganized it the other day. So now that top shelf is all fingering weight yarn that isn't going to be socks. So it's non-sock yarn. There are some sock yarn skeins in that thing, but I don't want to use them for socks, so that's why they're up there. And then the second shelf down, this one, is all yarn that's destined to be socks. It's all sock yarn. And then down here is a mixture. It's palette. It's the Icelandic yarn. There's some design skeins in there that I have ideas for already, so they're in that little basket. Oh, and I forgot to mention. So on that side up there is my right at the edge is lace weight, and then here there's some bulky and sport and other random weights of yarn in there as well. And then what you can't, oh no, you can see down here are all my sweater quantities that I've divided up into separate drawstring, those sort of like gauzy drawstring bags that you get when you order yarn online sometimes. I've separated them out into those, so I know those are my sweater quantities and those yarns are destined to be sweaters or cardigans or jumpers or whatever. So we were looking through that, and he was asking questions about it. I was like, you can pick out any yarn you want from this middle row, and I'll make you socks out of it if you like it. You just tell me which one you like, and I'll make you socks. I really don't mind. I'm not, because he doesn't really ask for anything. I'm always just like, if you pick anything, I'll make it for you. Like, honestly, I don't mind. So he picked out this skein. Out of all the yarn I have up there, he picked out this skein of West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply. I have no idea what the colour number is. I think it's either 06 or 365 or 0091. It's one of those three. I'm not sure what it is. I ordered this May last year. No idea. So he wants socks out of this. And I can't say no to him. So okay, he will get socks out of this. But I also picked up this skein of West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply when I was in London recently. This is one of their new bird ranges, which is Kingfisher. And I didn't buy the matching skein that came out at the same time to go specifically with this colourway. But I thought it goes well enough with this colour, because this one picks up on the darker blues in here. So I'm going to knit this for myself, and I'll use this, a small amount of this, just for contrasting heels. And then I'll knit the majority of this for socks for Perry. So that's what these will be, I'm sure. So those are the 5 extra skeins I've picked out to add to my 10 original skeins for the sockathon. So we will see. Right, where was I? So that's it for works in progress. Works in progress and upcoming stuff on my needles. We will move on to knit-alongs and giveaways, and this is going to be quite a big section. And there's quite a lot to go through on this one this week. So let me just reorganise myself here in a second. So we have the VitaCal, which is still ongoing, and sorry about that. Like I said, we have the VitaCal, which is ongoing until the end of this month, until 31st of January. So it's knitting any of the patterns in my Vita collection. It's the shawl, the hat, the socks. And there are rules for how many entries you get per item in the thread. So just go on in and check out the details and enter. And the prizes for that one, we have a bunch of pattern prizes, which I'm not going to go through again right now, but there's I think there's like 2 or 3 different pattern prize options. This one physical prize is this skein of Heart and Soul sock yarn and a set of stitch markers to go with it. And the other prize is going to be this project bag made by me. So these are the 2 prizes along with the pattern prizes for that cal. Then for the January Sockathon with Marsha of the Very Little Twitch and Stitch podcast, we are both hosting just general sock knit-alongs in our groups to see who can knit the most pairs of socks, and we both are doing prizes. Our rules and prize situation is dependent on our own. Each podcast is doing their own thing, so I can only speak for my one. I'm going to be doing general prizes, just drawing from the FO thread. So the first prize is going to be this duo skein. So they're 2 self-strapping skeins that match up perfectly. And this is by Steph from London House Yarns, the Dyer London House Yarns. And this is her 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. And it's the 4 Founders colourway, so it's a Harry Potter colourway. And it also comes with, and I don't know if you can see the stitch mark, you can see one of them. So the ends of the yarn have a stitch marker on them to show you which end to start with. And so this one has, you can see there's a brim there. And I think there's also a lightning bolt on the other one. I just can't find it right now. It's probably under the tag. So there's that, and she's also sent some tea. But I had so much left over from the minis that she sent me that when I knitted them into my blanket, I still had like 5 grams for each left over. So I wrapped those up again. So that's going to go to the winner with the yarn that's left sent. So I thought that would be quite a nice little package. Then if we, I haven't quite figured how I'm going to do this one yet. It'll either be the person who knits the most pairs of socks, or if someone's knit more than me or Marsha, I haven't quite figured that one out, or I might just draw from the prize thread. I haven't completely finalised it yet, but whoever, the second prize is going to be a skein of lovely yarn from Maya at the Wool Bun, and this is her Parma Violet colourway on her tweed sock base. So that's 85% superwash merino, 15% Donegal net, which are these beautiful tweedy flecks. And you have no idea how hard it is to part with this one. Maya sent this extra skein as a giveaway, and I was very tempted to keep it for myself because I love purple, and I've never actually knit with tweed yarn into a pair of socks, and I've heard really great things about Maya's tweed yarn, so it's going to be very hard for me to part with this one, but I will. And the third prize for the Sockathon that I've decided is going to be a collection of mini skeins from all the socks that I've knit for this month. I thought that would be quite fun. So someone will win a set of mini skeins. The number will depend on how many socks I manage to finish. So one from each pair of socks that I finish. I'll put it all together for you. So, you'll get a mini skein of this, and you'll get a mini skein of this Patterns Croy, and all the other socks that I've shown you, and all the ones that I do knit this month in one big bag, as it were, as a prize at the end to again, I'll draw that from the FOs in the threads. So yeah, I hope that sounds fun. And I just wanted to say massive thank you to everyone who's been so busy chattering away in the chatter threads on the group for the Sockathon. It's insane, and I love how you're all chatting with each other, because it's quite hard for me to actually keep up with all of you. You guys are chattering away so much now that it's great. And don't think that if I don't reply to your message that I haven't read it. I read all the messages in all the threads. It's just sometimes I don't have enough time to reply to every single person. So if there's a direct question or something that needs to be answered, I will make sure to answer those. But as for everything else, I do try and comment where I can, but it's impossible for me to keep up with everything because I have all these socks I have to knit. And we're also having the sweater knit along for 2016. It's a year-long knit along to see who can knit the most number of sweaters. That's not right at all. Scrap that. Not to see who can knit the most number of sweaters. That's the Sockathon. The sweater along is purely just to encourage each other to knit sweaters and to be there as a support system if anyone has any questions or stuff like that. There will be prizes for finished objects. I will draw prizes every 3 months, so I'll draw for a prize at the end of March, and then at the end of 3 months after that, 3 months after that, all that. So 4 times in a year I will draw prizes, and I haven't fully figured it out yet. I think the first one might be a project bag, like a sweater-sized project bag by me. So, like I said, I'm not 100% finalised yet, but I think that's probably what it's going to be. And again, that sweater knit along is actually going to be for the first quarter up until the end of March, is being run in conjunction with Nessa of the Kilter Craft podcast. She's also doing a garment knit along. The rules are basically anything that would be worn as a garment. This goes to mine as well. I know I've called it a sweater cowl, but it's not limited to knitting. For one thing, you can crochet. It is not limited to sweaters only. I mean, it could be cardigans, it could be like tops, anything that is considered a garment and not an accessory, like a shawl or gloves or hat and socks and stuff like that. because I will probably be mostly knitting cardigans for myself because I find them most practical for me and where we live, rather than a sweater or a pullover. So yeah, make sure you check out both our podcast threads. I've linked to Nessa's threads in my podcast in the Sweater Cow threads, and she's linked back to mine, so you can check in both. And yeah, make sure you enter into those as well if you're planning on knitting sweaters this year, or garments in general. And really quickly, moving on, I will mention now who won the 3,000 subscriber giveaway. So I sat down and I did the drawing this morning before I started filming. And to refresh your memory, the prize is 4 skeins of Let Lopi, which is sort of a worsted-ish weight of yarn in these 4 colours. There's this cute little needle felted sheep brooch, which is handmade in Iceland. A set of 4 buttons of a guy riding a reindeer, which I thought was quite fun. They're shanked metal buttons. There's nothing else in that. A bar of Icelandic chocolate, which I love. And a felted wool soap, which is fun as well and smells amazing. And the winner was number 151, and that was 92, and that's Robin, who also happens to host the Stitching Between Pages podcast. So congratulations, Robin. And she says, and the prompt for the giveaway was, what are your 2016 goals? And she says, I'm not much of one for making annual goals, but I do have a few for 2016. Finish some really old whips that have been languishing on my needles for months. Get out my sewing machine more often, and actually knit up the design that's been bouncing around in my head for the better part of 2015. So I hope you managed to get to those goals this year, Robin. And yeah, please get in touch with me with your address, and I will package up your prize and send it out to you as soon as possible. If you get in touch with me with your address by the end of the day on Wednesday, then I can get it in the mail to you on Thursday, because I leave. Actually, what am I talking about? I'm coming to the US. Give me your address, I'll mail it to you when I get to the US. That makes so much more sense. Why would I mail it from here and it'll take forever? Okay, I'll mail it to you when I get to New York, because that makes more sense, right? Get your address to me as soon as you can, and I will send it to you next week. All right. And moving on now, I did say at the beginning of every month I will run through a list of the current knit-alongs that are going on that are currently going on that I am aware of. Now I'm going to run through this list quite quickly. I'm not going to give you the start and end date for them. I'm just going to give you the title and the podcast who's hosting them. There is a separate thread in my Ravelry group for the current knit-alongs that are going on. If you find a new knit-along that is not on the list, please let me know, and please include a link directly to either the chatter thread or the finished object thread. I don't mind either. It just makes it so much easier for me when I go to update the threads. I don't have to spend too much time searching around for different knit-alongs that people mention. If you give me the link to them, I can do it quicker, and it makes it easier for me to keep on top of it. Like I said, because my time is quite limited. And I will try and update it as often as I can. It'll probably be on a weekly basis at this point, just because if I want to keep updating it, it'll take too much time. Right, so the current list is, we have the January Sockathon, co-hosted by myself and Marsha of the Very Little. We have the Cozy Toes Cal, which is hosted by the Bakery Bears podcast, which is another sock knit-along, which you're more than welcome to double, triple dip into. We have the No Makers Cal, which is hosted by This Old Knit and Love Suck Wool, and I believe that's a sock knit-along as well, which again, you can double, triple, quadruple, quintuple dip. There's the Vida Collection Cal, which is hosted in my group. There's the Colour Affection / Stripes Cal, which is being hosted by the Yonder Women podcast. There's a Shawl Along Cal, which is being co-hosted by Andre Sunitz, Undead Yarn, Bookish Stitcher, and the Penhook and Needles podcast. There's the 2016 Stash Down, which is being hosted by Brownie Knits. There's 12 pairs of socks in 2016, which is being hosted by the lovely lady these of the Caffeinated Knitting podcast. There's the Times Passed Along Cal, which is being hosted by the Eternity Ranch group. There's the Stash Bus Cal, which is being hosted by the Janina Callio Design Group. There's the Cable Along, which is being hosted by the Junk Yarn podcast. I'm not entirely sure when the end date was for that. If it's ended already, someone please let me know. There's the CC Garment Cal, which is being hosted by the Colourful Creativity podcast. There's the Winter's Blue Cal, which is being hosted by the High Fiber Diet podcast. Clean Slate Challenge 2016, hosted by the Just One More Row podcast. And Just One More Row is also doing a 12 Socks in 2016 knit along. There's the Self-Indulgent Cal 2016 by the Yarniacs podcast. And they are also doing a 2016 first quarter Love Your Stash challenge. There's the Epic Cal 2016 hosted by the Revelations of a Delusional Knitter podcast. There's the Charlotte's Web's Little Skein Along hosted by the Little Skein in the Big Wool group. There's an Indie Along, Wool and Vine Along this quarter, hosted by the Knitting Spring podcast. There's the New Year's Eve / Day Cal Knitting Men's Accessories, which is hosted by the Sticks Plus Twine podcast. There's the Self-Indulgent Craft Along, which is hosted by Stitch Together podcast. Post-Christmas Blues Cal by Robin of the Stitching Between Pages podcast. There's the Make Two Along hosted by Tiny Paper Foxes. There's January, which is hosted in the Trout Mail podcast group. There's the 2016 Brown Bag Sock Club hosted by Two Tangled Skeins, and I believe the Canadian Knitter is also doing that as well. Winter Camp 2016, which has been created by the Canadian Knitter podcast, but it's also been co-hosted by several other podcasts. There's the Sweater Fever Knit Along, which is hosted by the Knitting Broomstick podcast. Atwood Shawl Cal, hosted by Hugh Loco podcast. Comfort Knit Cal, which is being hosted by the Spicy Homemaker. The KTC Sweater Along, hosted by Kilter Craft podcast, which is Nessa, and that's for the first 3 months. It's being co-hosted with me, with my 2016 Sweater Along in my group. So that's my current rundown of what is going on at the moment. If there are any others that you want me to add to the list, please leave a comment in that thread and I will update it when I can. I've had no new questions sent to me this week. Oh, by the way, all those podcasts, I am not linking all those podcasts because it would take me way too long. So all the ones that I've mentioned in the sort of knit along section, if you just go to the knit along thread in my group, they are all linked there and you can find the podcasts through that. I've had no new questions sent to me this week to answer, so I will move on. Question that I have for you guys this week is, considering I am in sock knitting mania right now, socks are on my brain, quite literally. So what is your favourite sock pattern? I want to know. What sock pattern do you enjoy knitting the most? What sock pattern do you keep coming back to? Do you have your own sock recipe that you use? And, do you have your own personal sock recipe? How did you figure that out? Did it take you? I imagine for everyone, it was for me anyway, and I'm still tweaking my, I have my general pattern, but I'm still figuring out with different thicknesses of sock yarn, different changes I have to make to accommodate certain things. What are your favourite cuff, heel and toe options? What do you enjoy knitting the most? For which heel do you prefer? Which toe do you prefer? What sort of style of ribbing for the cuff do you prefer? It'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. So please let me know in the comment section of this episode. It'll be interesting to hear people's thoughts on that. Speaking of questions, we did have one person who asked last week about how to avoid holes in the corner when you use a contrasting heel. And I think this also works when you don't use a contrasting heel. But Selma, who's Selma123 on Ravelry, she is an occasional co-host on the Two Tangled Skeins podcast. She commented that what she sometimes does is, sometimes when you do a short row heel, they suggest you pick up a stitch in between when you're joining back in the round and then decreasing it out in the next round. I find that sometimes still leaves you with a hole, but what she suggested was you pick up the bar in between when you come to join. So between the two needles is the bar between the stitches. You pick it up, you twist it, and you put it on the left-hand needle. So you've essentially created a stitch out of that bar, kind of like, yeah, you've created that stitch. You're not picking up through, from underneath the bar. You're creating that bar, you're making that bar into a stitch. Stick it on your left-hand needle, and then you knit that new stitch you've created with the next stitch on your needle together. And that helps pull in that section, that helps to seal that gap. So that you don't have to remember to decrease it out in the next round, you've just done it there straight away. And I tried that with these socks. And I have to say, even though I haven't done a contrasting heel, it has really helped to tighten up that join. Now, I don't usually end up with massive gaping holes, but I do sometimes get a small gap that shows up. But there is absolutely no gap on these ones. Let me see if I can show you what I mean. Like, that is closed that up perfectly on both sides. And I usually always get a slight gap on one side because my pearl rows are looser than my knit rows. Not by much, but when it comes to socks, it's enough that you can notice when you're doing the heel. So that's a really good tip, and so thank you so much for that, Selma. I've tried it, it works, so I hope it helps you guys as well. I wanted to mention that here, and if you want to read her explanation of it, it is in the episode thread comments for last week's episode. As for other things, upcoming events, like I've mentioned before, I'll be at Vogue Knitting Live, which is at the end of next week, so a little under 2 weeks away, which I'm really looking forward to. If you guys are coming, please let me know, and please, if you do bump into me, if you do see me there, please come up and say hi. I'd love to meet you guys, and frankly, I don't know what you look like, so if you do see me around, please come and say hello. I'll probably be wearing one of my shawls, probably the Across the Pond shawl, I think. So if you see me wearing that around, please come up and say hi. That is that one that I've got up there. I'm going to be wearing that because it's probably the last opportunity I'm going to have to wear it to a knitting event, because I think the next time I see my mum, she's going to be stealing it back off me. For those of you who remember, I showed it to my mum and she basically fell in love with it, and then I went to put it on because I was going out to a knitting Christmas party. And she was just like, what are you doing with that? Where are you taking it? Where are you going with it? Like, it'll come back, don't worry. I'm not going to leave it behind or anything. Anyway, so that's hers, basically. And so I want to take the opportunity to wear it until I have to give it to her. Right, onto a section for knitting tips, which is something I've done on and off whenever I've come up with something to give you a tip about. So in the interest of the new year and trying to be organized, as I said, I reorganized my stash and my yarny goodness, and that is basically all of my yarn is up there. I do have a drawer, one of the drawers under my daybed has some yarn in it, but that is mostly yarn that I've set aside for giveaways and for prizes and stuff like that. So I don't count that as my stash because it's not yarn I'm going to be knitting, I'm going to be giving it away. So I think that's fair. I think that's fair. It's not yarn I'm planning on using for myself, it's for the podcast. And that's either from donations or from yarn I've set aside from my stash to give away. So that is my stash. And what I did was some of my yarn I'd already taken photos of. Some I hadn't taken pictures of. So as I was reorganizing my stash, I took pictures of all the yarns that I hadn't taken pictures of on my phone. And then what I did was I pulled all my yarn photos into a folder. Sorry, there's a car outside beeping for some reason. Into one folder, a yarn folder, photo album folder on my phone. So I have an iPhone, so I just created a new album and stuck all the yarn pictures in there. And then I went through and I created more folders. I created folders for sock yarn, a folder for fingering yarn, folder for lace weight sweaters, and then sport to worsted and bulky, sort of all together because there's not that many of them. And then I went through the main yarn folder and picked out, filled in the other folders. That way, when I'm out and about yarn shopping or wherever, I have my phone with me all the time. So I can quickly check what yarn I have, what yarn I don't have. If something I'm picking up, is that going to match with the yarn that I have in my mind that I have at home, or do I have something that matches with it for something else? And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, that's basically like having a Ravelry stash. Well, yes and no. Yes, it's kind of similar because it's a similar concept, But no, because for one thing, it's a lot quicker to do. You just take photos and it's in your album. It takes a lot less time to do than your Ravelry stash pages, which frankly is just really time consuming to get everything uploaded and in there. And frankly, I'd rather be knitting. And secondly, to access your Ravelry stash when you're out and about, you have to have a data connection. You have to have internet access on your phone when you're out and about to be able to check your stash because it's online. With this method, you have your stash on your phone with you all the time, whether or not you have an internet connection or data service or anything like that. It is always there because it's in your photo album. So I find that's working quite well for me. And that's probably what I'm going to stick with. And that's what I've done. So when I'm at Vogue Knitting Live or anywhere else, when I'm potentially thinking of buying yarn, I can look to see what I already have so I don't end up buying duplicates or, if I've got something that will match with something else and seeing how it goes. So that's what I've done. And then what I've also decided to do, because one of my goals was to have, to end the year having used more yarn that to have ended the year with less yarn in my stash than when I started. And that's not to say I'm not going to buy any yarn, that's to say I want to knit more yarn than I buy. If that makes sense. So at the start of this year, I have 176 skeins of yarn in my stash. That's also that, and I count a skein as like one ball. So even like a 50-gram ball of palette is one skein, the same as a 100-gram skein of suck yarn is one skein. So they're not all 100-gram balls, is what I'm getting at. There's a lot of them that are only 50 grams each, but they're counted as one. So there's 176 skeins in there. So at the end of the year, I'd like to have less than 176 left in my stash, if that makes sense. So that breaks down to being, I have, I've just realised I'm missing actually something from that list. I think it's a little bit more than that actually, because I've realised I've missed a heading. So I have 21 skeins. It's actually more, it's actually 230, not 176, because I've realised I missed a heading, which I'll come to in a second. So I have 21 skeins of lace weight. I have 62 skeins of sock yarn that I've allocated as sock yarn on that sock level. I have 10 skeins of sport weight, 1 DK, 14 worsted, 7 bulky, and 61 skeins down here, which are allocated as sweaters, or to become sweaters, jumpers, cardigans, something bigger. But what is missing is about 60 skeins for other fingering weight at the top, which for some reason hasn't gone onto my list. But I've created this tally and I'll just add that in there, so it's not a problem. But so then I can keep a tally of skeins used, skeins, basically so out and in. So it's just like a running total, and at the end of the year I can see what I have used, and that's just at the back of my knitting journal. So I hope that is somewhat useful for you guys as well, and you may find that handy maybe. Shop news. I had a shop update on Saturday at 9 PM local time here, and honestly you guys, I am so grateful for all of your support. You guys are amazing. I honestly can't believe how quickly everything went. It was ridiculous. I have a massive stack of posts to take to the post office. I don't think I've ever had this many packages to take in one go. I would have gone yesterday, but Perry had to take the car. His work car was getting repaired or something. So I didn't have a car yesterday, so I couldn't get to the post office, but I'm going to go today after I finish recording. There's only 2 bags left in the shop, so thank you so much everyone for your support. I will be putting the shop on holiday mode at the end of the week when we leave, so if you are interested in one of the last 2 bags in the shop, then please, if you want to purchase them before the end of the week so I can get those out to you. We leave on Friday morning, so basically by Wednesday evening, really, or Thursday morning. And I have no new acquisitions to share with you this week, so there's that. Probably a good thing because this has been a very long episode so far. And I think I will just move on to my week in review. So it's been a very relatively laid back week this last week. Like I said, I spent most of the last few days in the run up to the new year working on my sock yarn blanket in an attempt to avoid casting on anything new. So I did add 30 squares to that, which was quite good. New Year's Eve, I realised I hadn't told Perry about the soccer-thon and that he had no idea about it. And I have no idea how I managed to go this long without telling him, but I explained the concept to him and stuff, and he found it interesting. And his response was, so what do you win? So what do you mean, what do I win? He was like, well, what if you win? If you knit more socks than this other person, what do you win? Like, well, nothing. There's no prize. It's just for fun. And he was like, oh. Which made me realise, Marsha, we'd never actually talked about whether we were going to do anything at the end of it for whoever won. But I honestly don't mind. I'm doing it. I was saying to him, I'm doing it for the fun of it. You do it for just to see who can do more. You don't have to do it for something. So I thought that was quite a funny reaction to it, really. Anyway, I realised I just don't talk to him that much about knitting because it's not a massive interest to him. Occasionally he'll ask questions about what I'm working on and stuff like that, but in general I don't really bring it up, as it were, because he doesn't find it particularly it's not his main interest sort of thing, so I don't want to bore him with it. But on New Year's Day, I was in my, we woke up in the morning and he was getting ready and I was downstairs, started working on my socks, and he came in to see me and I'm feverishly knitting away on my socks, and he's just like, I'm never going to see you this weekend, am I? I'm just not going to see you at all for the next couple of days. You're going to be in your sock knitting cave, which is where the title of this episode comes from. And I was just like, oh no, I can knit and do other things. Like, we can do other things while I knit. I don't have to be sat here all weekend. I want to spend time with you as well. He was like, okay, well, do you want to go to the cinema then? I'm like, yeah, I can knit at the cinema. He was like, yeah, I know. I'm trying to think of something we can do together where you're still knitting, because he knows I'm not going to be putting down my knitting needles. So that was quite funny and very sweet of him too. So we went to see The Hunger Games, which we really enjoyed. We enjoyed the film, the latest one, and but I have to say, this always gets me in the Middle East. It's just something that it still surprises me, but it doesn't surprise me anymore at the same time, is parents bring their very young children to films that are not appropriate for their age group. So there were some really young children in the screening of The Hunger Games, and when I say young children, I mean toddlers and younger. Like, there was one actual, like, proper little teeny tiny baby, like it couldn't have been more than a couple months old, in that theatre. And for other than the fact that it's way too loud for a small child like a 2-month-old to be in a cinema screen, it is just completely inappropriate sort of like viewing for a small child. And then to expect a small toddler to sit still for 2.5 hours and not to do anything, it's just, again, it's ridiculous. And when a couple of the children clearly had enough by, halfway through the film or whatever, just start screaming and crying and just being really disruptive for everyone else. And then the parents don't do anything about it. They don't, if it was me, and I know my mum's done this in the past when we've been young, if we start screaming and shouting and start disrupting everyone else, you take the child outside of the situation, you remove them from the situation. They just ignored it. They just sat there and didn't do anything about it. And that kind of really bothered me a bit. I'm like, for one thing, you shouldn't be bringing a child to a film like this. It's rated PG-15. So yeah, you can bring a child with you if they're under the age of 15, but there should be some sort of limit to that as well. I mean, you shouldn't be able to bring a toddler to a film that is like that. Anyway, it's happened so many times now that we always see people taking like babies and children, it's really young children, to like films that are really not appropriate viewing for children of that age. That, like I said, it doesn't really surprise me anymore, but it still annoys me. Rant over. I apologise for that. I didn't really mean to go off on a rant with that one. But anyway, we were at lunch later and we were chatting, and Perry wouldn't let me knit at lunchtime, so anyway, it was fine. But we got to chatting, we were sort of reminiscing about how we ended up here. And it was quite funny because we'd never really thought about it before in terms of, what was the one thing that's happened that led us to here, if that makes sense. So we traced it back to the company Perry worked for before. He was a consultant for them, so he would work on projects for their clients, for different clients. And he was working for a client in Abu Dhabi at the start of 2014, and it was originally a 3-month contract. So the contract was due to end at the end of March, and so we planned around that, and we booked a holiday, like a 10-day trip to go to Iran. And I'm Iranian by sort of like background. I was born in the UK, but my parents are both Iranian, and I really wanted to take Perry to Iran, ever since we'd gotten together. And he's always wanted to go as well, and it's just sort of worked out that we were like, right, okay, we can go then. My mum was able to come and join us, and we would meet us there and stuff. And so we booked the trip, planning it around his contract for this client. And as it was getting towards the end, the client was talking about extending the contract, and Perry was like, okay, well, that's fine, we can extend it, but I have this holiday booked, so I'm going to have to, I'm taking my holiday and I'll come back afterwards. And his employer was really good about it, and they supported him. He was like, yeah, Perry's entitled to this break, and he'll come back after that. Anyway, the client just got really funny about it, and in the end was like, no, and just cancelled the contract. I mean, the contract ended, he just didn't extend it. He cancelled the extension. And so that's what happened. So Perry left, he finished up his contract with that client, and we went on our holiday. We came back, and in less than a week, I say less than a week, like 2 days after we got back, he said he was assigned to this project in Saudi Arabia. And his words to me, these were his exact words, were, it's only going to be for 4 weeks. Yeah, 4 weeks. So he got his visa in less than a week. They sorted it out, and he went. He went. He was away during the week, and he was back at the weekends. So, like I said, 4 weeks originally, and then they extended the contract. And so this was. So he started working there. I think it was in May, sort of end of April, beginning of May, and so they extended the contract, and at that time, the time they extended the contract, one of his, I guess the person who is now his boss, asked him if he would be interested if they made him an offer for like a full-time position. And that was right around the time we were going away again. We went away, we actually went to New York for a week in the beginning of June. And so we spent a lot of that trip talking about it and whether or not it'd be worth doing it. And Perry was sort of like trying to figure out the financials of it and stuff like that. Because he was going to be doing this MBA, and that was part of the negotiation for that job and all this and that. And it was very much like, okay, well, this is the minimum that we could accept for him to do this job, considering we knew what it was going to mean to do it. And because my project that I was working on was coming to an end, so this was back in the summer of 2014. So my project was coming to an end. I didn't know how much longer I was going to have a job for. So it was going to have to be a salary that we could live on without both of us without me working, potentially. We weren't sure, there were so many ifs and buts. We had to make sure that whatever it was going to be, suitable for our situation. Anyway, they came back and it was all fine. Obviously, it all worked out, and he started working. He gave his notice to work, and he started working for what was his client and is now his company, in September of 2014. So it's been over a year now. It's been a year and a half almost that he's been working with them. And yeah, it's funny to think that one guy's decision to basically not extend his contract has basically led us to moving to Bahrain effectively, because if that contract had been extended, he wouldn't have been assigned to the project in Saudi Arabia, and he never would have worked for that client, and we never would have moved. He never would have been offered the job. But on the flip side, I don't think it was a bad thing. We were talking about it the other day, and I was asking him, do you think we made the right decision moving here? Do you think it was the right thing to do? And he was like, well, I think, it's hard to know how something like that's going to affect us when you don't really know because you've never done it before. But I think it's affected us in ways that we hadn't really expected. There have been some things that have been harder to adjust to than we had anticipated. But overall, I think it's been the right thing to do. I would never have started a podcast if we hadn't moved. I wouldn't have started making and selling bags if we hadn't moved. Perry probably wouldn't have been able to do the MBA if we hadn't moved. His last company weren't particularly supportive of him doing this particular one, because it involved so much time off. We wouldn't have traveled as much. I wouldn't have met and like made so many new amazing friends in the knitting community. Honestly, I just think so many things would have been different that I can't sit here and say that it was the wrong thing to do, if that makes sense. There have definitely been some difficult things to deal with, but I think the positives have outweighed the negatives in the long run. And yeah, so that was a little bit of a New Year's retrospective, as it were. We sort of got to chatting about it, and I just thought it might be interesting to share a little bit. Yeah, it's just funny sometimes to sit and reflect on things and to see how certain decisions have, you never would have thought that something so little as that could have, like just ending a contract and not extending it. Something is what seems rather insignificant at the time actually has quite a big impact later on in terms of ongoing events and like, not ongoing events, like the ongoing effects of that decision can be much more life-changing, which is interesting. That's all. And the last thing I just wanted to say was today, thankfully, has not been as bad so far. Yesterday was so windy. It was literally howling. The wind was howling last night and the night before and all of yesterday. So much so that every now and again I had to stop listening to what I was listening to see if there was someone trying to knock at the door. It was so loud. And the boys were completely freaked out all day. They were just, every time the wind was blowing somewhere, if they were downstairs and I could see them, they'd just be like constantly on edge and like just did not like it at all. But thankfully it's calmed down today, so they're a bit calmer. I actually have to take them to the vet later this afternoon. They need their annual jabs, so I'm gonna go take them this afternoon. So I'm not entirely sure what time this podcast is going to be uploaded. I need to export it to my computer and get the editing done and then get it exporting and onto YouTube, during which time I'll probably run to the post office and hopefully it will be up before I have to go to the vets. Otherwise it will go up later after I come back. So it'll be up whenever you get to see this. And as of next week, I will be moving to a Wednesday upload schedule. I think I will, that will give me a little bit more time, I think, for filming. Occasionally I'll need to film on a Tuesday to upload on Wednesdays, and other times I will be able to film and upload on Wednesdays. I just think middle of the week is a little bit easier for me. Going forward with all of our traveling and stuff, I tend to travel a lot on Mondays. Mondays always seems to end up being the day that I travel. Sunday and Mondays seem to be the travel days, and that always ends up meaning I have to pre-record or plan around that for my podcast, which isn't a problem, and I've been doing it since I started. But I just think to keep things, like I said, to keep it easier and keep it more enjoyable, I guess, for me. I enjoy doing it whenever I get to film. It's just more a case of making sure that I'm not overdoing it and not overstretching myself to a point where then it becomes a chore. So yeah. So thank you very much for joining me. If you have any questions for me, please let me know in the questions and answers or questions and suggestions thread on the Ravelry group. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section of the episode thread for this week. And yeah, I just enjoy hearing from you guys whenever. So thank you so much for joining me again this week, and I hope to see you again next week. Take care and happy knitting. Bye.